Post, an American news and website blog, reports, President George W. Bush stated in his final address of the day for 9/11, "Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist attacks. Many of you were born shortly before or after the attack occurred. It is very important to understand how important the event is for the United States history and to understand what happened that day. Growing up shortly after the attack occurred, I find it very fascinating. In school, we have studied many stories of the survivors, and when adults talk about it, they always say they can remember exactly what they were doing when they heard that the first plane struck the Twin Towers." That statement has always intrigued me. It shows how huge of an impact 9/11 had on the U.S. as a whole. So I decided to further my research, and I found many interesting facts that I'd like to share with you today. 9/11 was a major event in the United States history. Today I'm going to tell you about what led up to this event, the timeline of the day, and the aftermath of 9/11. September 11, 2001, before the attacks occurred, many innocent people went to work and boarded planes not knowing their lives are going to change forever. According to the HuffPost, at 7:59, the first flight, American Airlines Flight 11, left for LA carrying 92 passengers. Shortly after, United Airlines Flight 175 left for LA at 8:14 carrying 65 passengers. The third flight, American Airlines Flight 77, left for LA at 8:20 with 64 passengers. The final flight, United Airlines 93, left for San Francisco carrying 43 passengers. Serge Schmemann, a writer for the New York Times Global Edition and Emmy Award winner, stated that 24,000 people went to work at the Pentagon that day, not knowing that they were going to be under attack. The hijackers carefully coordinated plans by hijacking planes that were going far distances so they would be full on fuel. In that short amount of time, many events happened on 9/11. According to John Kiffner, a former senior foreign correspondent for the New York Times, each plane had 3 to 6 men carrying box cutters and knives that they had concealed in their carry-ons. They threatened or slashed the flight attendants to try and get the pilots to open up the cockpits. Kiffner went on to say that Flight 11 was only on track for Los Angeles for about 16 minutes before it was taken over and its destination was unknown. By 8:20, the plane's transponder went out and the flight's location was unknown. Schmemann stated that at 8:48, Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower. Terry Riley, a Star's newspaper writer, tells us the story of Joe Ditmar, a 9/11 survivor. Ditmar walked to the window facing the North Tower. Directly across was the other tower's huge, gaping black hole, and as he watched, he saw people fall from the other tower. Schmemann wrote that 8 minutes later, at 9:06, Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. According to Terry Riley, the plane was traveling at about 600 miles per hour and crashed through floors 77 through 85, killing everyone on the 78th floor immediately. He also tells us that the 35th floor was the worst for Joe Ditmar. As he passed police and firefighters on their way up, he said you could tell by the look in their eye they knew. They knew they were going to fight fires that could not be stopped. They knew that they were going to save lives that could not be saved. They knew that they were never going to be coming back that day. John Cushman Jr., a writer and editor for the Washington Bureau of the New York Times, and Elaine Scalino, a former Paris bureau chief, report that at 9 a.m., Flight 77's location was lost, and it was headed towards the Pentagon. By 9:45, it had crashed into the Pentagon. Sarah Reimer has been working for New York Times for 26 years, and Jerry Longman, a sports reporter for the New York Times, states that at 10:03, Flight 93 was seen crashing into a field in Pennsylvania, killing everyone on board. Schmemann wrote the United Airlines 93 crashed near Pittsburgh, raising the possibility that the hijackers had failed whatever mission they were given. The HuffPost then stated, after passengers found out that they were being targeted, they decided to fight back. They stormed the hijackers in an attempt to regain control, and that's when the hijackers took the plane and intentionally crashed into a field, killing everybody on board. These major events created a disaster for the United States. Many lives were lost and destroyed on 9/11. According to the HuffPost, at 9:50, the South Tower crashed and killed about 600 people in only 10 seconds. Joe Ditmar, a 9/11 survivor, recalls, I turned and heard an awful sound of steel and concrete twisting and breaking. I will never forget the awful noise of millions of New Yorkers' blood-curdling screams. The HuffPost then wrote, at 10:28, the North Tower collapsed and killed 1,400 people. Schmemann also stated, a disquieting sense grew throughout the triage centers and emergency rooms in New York, as they actually knew that there would probably be less work for them. The morgues were going to be the busiest. Jack Rosenthal, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, editor, and executive, tells us that a loss of shocking 343 firefighters, 23 New York police officers, and 37 Port Authority officials sank in on the public. Thousands of innocent lives were lost, and they will never be forgotten. This catastrophic event will forever be a part of the United States history. From the start of the day to the mass destruction to the aftermath of 9/11 made an impact on the United States as a whole. The HuffPost reported that President George W. Bush went on to say, these acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. Great people have been moved to defend a great nation. Thank you.